All right, Paolo, take it away.
For sure. So, hey guys, thank you so much for coming out today. I know it's in the middle of midterm season, so we really appreciate you guys coming out to speak and everybody who could participate. We are recording this as well, so we could send it out on all of our platforms and share it with anyone who didn't have the chance to make it here. But so this meeting is basically a Bruin Women in Business / Startup Labs joint panel. And we decided to team up on this event because we both saw there was a huge gap in female founder resources and women entrepreneurship at UCLA. I myself, as the director at Startup Labs, noticed from last year when I was in operations that we had a large amount of male applicants and not enough female applicants in the program. And we kind of realized that it was our job, like as a director and as a student at UCLA, to kind of spur the exposure and make it more known. So yeah, Crystal, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, so Paolo pretty much covered it. So again, thank you all for coming and celebrating just female founders in the entrepreneurship scene. So I hope for any of you who are interested in creating your own business in the future, I hope these stories give you some motivation and inspiration to do so. And hopefully they empower you to also take the first step, no matter what background you come from. Like if they can do it, you guys can do it as well. So at the end, we will share some resources for you if you are interested in taking the same path as these panelists. But for now, Paolo, feel free to introduce the panelists as well as our moderators for today.
Definitely. So today we're going to have two amazing moderators kind of ask our panelists questions and initiate conversation. So Michelle is from Startup Labs. She just joined the operations and partnerships team, and she's really into everything that has to do with startups at UCLA. And Ria is from Bruin Women in Business. And if you guys want to talk a bit about yourselves, you could definitely unmute.
Yeah, I can just briefly introduce myself. Oh, sorry, Michelle.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, so I am from Bruin Women in Business. I'm the external vice president. I'm also a fourth year at UCLA, double majoring in economics and communication studies. And I actually did work at a startup over the summer. So I'm really excited to be able to speak with female founders and hear about your experiences. Michelle, take the wheel.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a second year studying business economics. And I'm going to be moderating with amazing Ria today. And I can't wait to hear the story about you all. So thanks for coming again.
Awesome. And we also have 4 amazing panelists. We actually had 5 panelists, but one of them couldn't make it today. So we are going to record her. We already recorded her section of the fireside chat, and we'll be sharing it with you guys after this event. But we have Diondraya, who started Mindset and Milestones, and just an amazing entrepreneur from UCLA, studying her PhD at the same time. So it'll be an amazing experience getting to talk with her. Keisha, who actually went inside the Startup Labs program, as well as Min, and they both founded amazing companies at UCLA. And Sophia, who started tutoring for heroes at UCLA. So if the moderators want to take it over.
Yeah, sure. I guess we would like to begin this panel with this question, which is, where did you get your inspiration from for your ventures? Did you have any, I guess, sources of influence?
One sec, right before we start too, I think before you guys each speak, I think you guys should explain a bit about your ventures, what year you are, and anything else you want to say about entrepreneurship.
Definitely.
I can go first. Oh, are you guys calling on people, or are we just?
No, definitely. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia. I'm a sophomore. I'm studying Phi-Sci. I'm currently pre-med, and I founded Tutoring for Heroes, which is a nonprofit organization in which we tutor the children of healthcare workers.
Cool, great. I can go next.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first, thank you, Paolo, for inviting me here. I'm super excited to be part of this panel tonight. I'm a recent graduate from UCLA this past summer, and I founded Next Best, which is a local marketplace for secondhand fashion. And our main mission is just to make fashion more sustainable. So we're kind of trying out different ways to figure out what's the best way to prolong the life cycle of clothes, and then also partner up with like smaller sustainable brands and really encourage people to shop more sustainably.
I can go next. So like Min, I'm also a recent graduate from UCLA, and I founded JustFlow, which is basically kind of a Chrome extension designed to optimize Gen Z students' productivity through accountability and friendships. And so the way that I think of it is like Gen Z students would have to download Chrome extension and kind of use that to encourage each other to be productive through
Cool. Diondraya, can you maybe expand?
Yeah, my name is Diondraya. I was a UCLA alum, actually. I graduated in March, and I was a psychobio major and an entrepreneurship minor. And then now I am a first-year PhD student in the higher education and organizational change program at UCLA. Mindset and Milestones was really, we teach entrepreneurial skills to high school girls and sometimes middle school girls, depending on the programs that they're available for. But sort of speaking to the question of where the idea came from, it really came out of feeling like we weren't having these conversations with girls about what it means to be prepared to work in male dominated spaces or in spaces where people think you might not, be qualified to be there. How to negotiate those spaces and feel like you belong and to recognize your value. And so we felt like entrepreneurship was a great way to communicate those skills or become a vehicle for those skills. And so that's really where it came from. It stemmed from a lack of female representation and led to starting to have these conversations with girls before they needed to be ready.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. Sophia, can you maybe explain the inspiration you got for your ventures?
Sure. So I actually just started my organization this year. It happened in April, just when COVID was catching. It was just like speeding up really quickly. And I had a lot of family friends who were healthcare workers that were working in hospitals and just kind of like watching, just looking on the news. I was thinking about, mothers and fathers that were starting to have to juggle work and life balance and also deal with the transition of online school for their children, which I think is something really challenging. Parenting is already difficult enough. And the fact that they were also working like 24-hour shifts in hospitals when COVID was just beginning, I really wanted to help them. And I was trying to find a way that would be safe for not only myself, but for the volunteers and for anyone who wanted to be part of the organization. So I wanted to do something virtual. And that's how I kind of came up with this idea. And yeah, we just get to tutor children of healthcare workers. It's all been online. But yeah, that's kind of where the idea started.
That sounds amazing. Min, can you go next?
Yeah, just talking about kind of like the inspiration of what encouraged us to start our venture in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's see. I feel like a lot of the inspiration came from just kind of seeing like other people start things on campus, like seeing other entrepreneurs, but like particularly like my story and why I started Next Best in the first place was because I was really into like thrifting. Like growing up, I was just like an avid thrifter my entire life. Like I was very resourceful, and it was very like in my family, like you never throw anything away. Like you save ribbon from Christmas so you can use on like a class project later, And so I remember like my freshman year of campus, like at UCLA, we were all moving out, and like you're kind of moving out of your dorms. And I remember like seeing like piles of just like clothes lined up like against the trash chute, like piles of clothes and just like other unopened things. Like I remember my cousin just like grabbed a box of like protein bars that were like gonna be thrown away because people couldn't like fit it in their cars. But I think that kind of like really stemmed and kind of encouraged me to think like how I can promote this more like resourceful, like don't throw things away, like things can always be used. And that's kind of why I started like the first version of Next Best in the first place, which was like Refine LA on campus. And it was like a social organization that was kind of promoting the like cycling of clothes on campus. So instead of throwing it away, like we'll take it and then we'll kind of like sell it and just redistribute it to people who want it. That's kind of where it started.
Oh, awesome. That's a really good idea. And also, last but not least, Keisha, can you maybe tell us your inspiration, please?
For sure. So COVID kind of really hit us all, and that is actually one of the inspiration for my venture. I know that for me personally, I'm the most unmotivated, unproductive person I know. Like I'm always distracted online with everything that's virtual, like classes online. And it was really hard for me to get my work done. And I knew that I think of it as kind of like an analogy of when you go to the gym with your best friend, you know that you guys both have to work out together and you make that promise like, hey, let's go to the gym tomorrow. And that kind of accountability makes you more productive in that way. So I kind of use that idea in helping in just kind of solving how Gen Z students who have to do classes online can be productive during this time.
Awesome. Ria?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask the next question, which is, what was the catalyst that led to the founding of your business? So I know everyone talked briefly about, the inspiration for their business, where the idea came from, but like, what was the moment that made you feel, hey, I need to make this business and I need to make this business now? And we can go ahead and start with anyone. I'm just randomly going to pick Min.
Nice. So I think I'll kind of get the catalyst for like my first venture, which was Refine LA, because I think it kind of bled into Next Best afterwards. I think Next Best was more like I really saw like after building up this community. Refine LA is kind of like a social organization that's on campus now, but it was kind of like I built a community of like 24 girls who were also interested in the space, and then just listening to them and listening about how much they care about sustainable fashion. That was like, and kind of hearing like how big of a problem it was, like people wanting to sell their clothes and not having an easy solution on campus to sell it. So that's kind of what led me to think of Next Best, which is the local marketplace in the first place. But I think originally, I think the catalyst for Refine LA was, I think it was more like having the confidence to start something. And I think that came from kind of meeting two other people who were interested in it. And I was like, okay, I really want to do this idea. Like, can you help me with it? And then once they got a yes, it was like, okay, let's really do this. So I think it really was like kind of this encouragement and like stable, just kind of like you can do this and wanting to really push it on campus, if that makes sense.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Diondraya, do you want to go next and share your catalyst?
Sure. So like I mentioned before, the sort of inspiration was around recognizing the lack of female representation in most spaces that involved money and power. And so thinking through that, my first year of college was a lot of personal frustration. So I was in a lot of chemistry classes and sort of different spaces, and there were definitely not equal representations, but specifically as sort of a Black woman, all of these things just kind of were very in my face about sort of what it feels like and how do you understand your value when you're being made to feel like you don't have any. And so a lot of the questions that I was asking myself were questions that I would ask my friends. And, it just kind of started to come about as I explored the problem. It was more recognizing through my friends and through, different organizations that I'd worked with before that this was not just me feeling like we weren't having these conversations early enough. And so it was sort of the validation of the problem that started, that sort of made me feel like there was a need to take action as a result of that.
So much for sharing. It's an amazing cause. Sophia, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think for me, like I said, COVID is definitely something that really inspired me to do this. And I think something that really was eye-opening for me is when I started seeing moms who were not able to go back home to their kids after working in the hospital because they didn't want to put their entire family at risk. And I think that just really hit me because I can't imagine like being that young in elementary school and middle school, and you're not really like understanding what's going on and why your parent can't be there to help you with school or just daily things that, you know, your parent is usually there for. And I also wanted to bring ease of mind to those parents who couldn't be with their kids, that they can still do school online and they can still have a support system, that they don't have to do everything by themselves, and that it's okay to ask for help and to get that kind of support. And I think that's what really pushed me to want to do this and spread the word about it.
That's amazing. Keisha, do you want to tell us about your catalyst moment?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just recognizing how a lot of my friends are also kind of going through the same thing, like easily distracted when they're online. Like honestly, just seeing all of the memes that they would put out, and I'm like, aren't you actually supposed to be working on that paper? But you know, like no one is during that, like during this time. So I think for me, that was one of the moments where I was like, okay, maybe it's not just me. I'm not like the most undisciplined or unproductive person in this space right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Michelle, do you want to take it over with the next question?
Yeah, sure. So I think like, I guess when you're establishing your own startup, I think it's kind of common to see like people around you being like, I mean, don't be offended, but I don't think the idea is going to work. You know, that kind of objection, I guess. So did people actually like kind of encourage you in your idea at first, or did you kind of meet any objection or I guess disagreement? So Min, do you want to start?
Sure. That's a really good question. I think when you're starting off and like we're all like very young entrepreneurs, right? Like you do get like people are very encouraging, but like you kind of know like you really want to ask them for like some sort of criticism. I think that's really important to kind of know, especially when you're like thinking about a venture that you want to start and you don't want to waste your time almost like building something that people don't want. So I do enjoy kind of hearing like constructive criticism and like kind of seeing like why this wouldn't work and how I can fix it, because it's not like your idea is not going to work. It's just maybe you're going down the wrong path and you're going to help push me towards like the better path. But I guess personally, I think like I have some critical friends that have like really talked, like sat down with me and we would kind of discuss like what are like the risks involved or like what are the challenges that you're likely to face. And I guess it's something that you just have to take into account, you know, and kind of use it as a way to just make your venture even more strong. So I don't see it as, you kind of see it's kind of like sometimes you're like, oh darn, like this is very hard. But I think as long as you're confident that there's a problem, like you're solving things, you're creating a solution for a problem, and just hearing like criticism will just help you come up with a better solution, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Sophia, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think for me, I definitely had like a lot of people encouraging me because they just thought it was like a good idea during this time. I think getting over doubting yourself is something really important. I think I had a lot of doubt initially, just thinking, you know, what are, like Min was saying, what are the difficulties that I'm going to encounter when I start this? Is it going to help people more than it's going to potentially, you know, cause issues and not help people? So I think just being honest with yourself and thinking about the challenges that you might face, and then just reminding yourself that, you know what, if this is for a good cause, then we may as well just try it. And if it doesn't work, then it's okay. I've definitely faced a lot of issues and challenges during like this whole journey. But being able to pick yourself back up and remind yourself that it's okay to, you know, make mistakes and we just learn from them. But yeah, that's kind of how my journey went.
Yeah, I mean, being resilient is definitely the most important thing, I guess. Keisha, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think just kind of piggybacking off of those responses because they're really good. I always think of it as this way, like if you're doubting, if people are kind of like letting you know, like, oh, I don't think this is gonna work, and then kind of influences your own doubts about yourself. I always remember that a good idea is always considered crazy until it's not. Like I remember like so many people, there's so many big business or big ideas right now that I'm sure face a lot of criticism in the beginning because nobody thought that those ideas were going to take off. But the founder was committed to it. And I think if you're committed to your cause, your problem, and you know that this is a solution to a bigger problem at hand, then I think it could really, go places. So it's hard to really turn that into reality when you're like doubting yourself, but it's kind of like keep trekking on.
Yeah, for sure. Last but not least, Diondraya, can you please?
Yeah. I did face some initial criticism, not around the concept in general, but around the fact that I was focused on girls. There are a lot of people who are like, boys need these skills too, and like entrepreneurship is really important and it teaches a lot of valuable skills and all these things. Yes, I completely agree. And there's several organizations that do a lot of amazing work with youths at large. But part of recognizing what criticism is constructive and what criticism you should let go is related to knowing what you're trying to do. And so for me, it required me to get very clear about what my mission was, and that there were specific things that were related to focusing on girls, to having environments that were specific to that allowed girls to sort of see themselves in every space, as opposed to only seeing themselves in the spaces that we typically see women in, was important to the work that I did. The second thing I'll say about like criticism in general, if something's going to take off or whatever, that's one thing, but I think it's important to define what success is for you. And for me, if I can help 50, 100, 1,000 girls, one girl is enough. At this point, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so if it doesn't become the biggest thing in the world, that's okay with me. That doesn't mean failure. So I would encourage those who are trying to come up with ideas or thinking that they have something they want to pursue to consider, what does it mean for that to be successful? And if that works for you, then that's enough.
Yeah, super inspirational. Thank you all for that. Ria, can you ask the next question, please?
Absolutely. So the next question is, did you have a mentor during your journey beginning your idea? And would you recommend having a mentor? And I'll pass that right back to Diondraya.
Sure. I'm a large advocate for mentorship. My first mentor was there the entire way I was writing the first version of my workbook, and it wouldn't have gotten finished without her. The mentors that I've had thus far are reasons that I've gotten access to partnerships or certain schools. Like, mentors are really, really important, especially when they're in sort of the industry that you want to be in, or they have knowledge that is important to your success, because having someone as a sounding board who's invested in what you're doing, and not in sort of the monetary sense, but just like wants to see you succeed, is the best way to figure out how to get constructive criticism, because they want you to be successful. So you don't have to wonder whether it's, any of these sort of other motives around giving you criticism when you're talking to this person. So thinking through things like that, as well as understanding where you need to go and what things you might not know yet, because there's going to be a lot. So the more information you have, the more people you have to keep you out of walking into traps that aren't necessary, the better.
Exactly. I totally agree. Keisha, do you want to go next on the mentor question?
So when I started this, I joined Startup Labs, and they immediately pair you with a mentor who's in your field or in a similar field to kind of walk you through the startup process. So I think that was like super helpful for us, because he pointed out a lot of pain points that we were going to go through. And originally I had started out with another idea before pivoting to this. And so he was able to kind of point those out for us as kind of a way to let us know, like, hey, this may be something that you should look at, or he would just other resources. So I think having another pair of eyes to kind of guide us through the process was really helpful.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
Startup Labs is a great resource. Love Paolo's chat. Apply to Startup Labs. All right. Sophia, would you like to go and talk about this?
Mm-hmm. So for me, mentors, I have them mostly in the healthcare field just because I thought that it was important to have a mentor that was in the field that I was helping. That way I know exactly what is needed, what I need to do on my part, and what healthcare workers are actually looking for during this time. So I was lucky enough to get doctors and nurses at from the UCLA hospital because I have volunteered there before. So I think just trying to make connections within your field is really important for gaining mentors, because once you reach out to them, you're already familiar with them and with what they do. And I think it really just eases the process of them becoming your mentor, just facilitating that initial communication. So for me, just having them was important because they guided me in what exactly they needed, what they were looking for during this time, especially those with children. That was just beyond helpful, so that I knew exactly what I needed to do in order to help them to the best of my ability.
That's amazing. Love that point of having people directly in the industry you're trying to help. Min, last but not least.
Yeah, my experience is very similar to Keisha's. Like we were both doing the Startup Labs program together, and so it was very like helpful that they paired it up with the mentor that would be relevant to what we're doing. And so my mentor, like she was super badass. I don't know if I can say, yeah, but like she was like a woman founder too. Like she was founding the app, and that's what we were doing. And so I think like the good thing about mentors is that like they have like years of experience on you usually, and so they usually encounter like very similar programs or like very similar problems that you are bound to encounter later. And so definitely like kind of getting her guidance was very helpful, and just hearing her insights and just like giving us advice was very helpful. But I will say like I'm not the best at like keeping in touch with mentors, and I'm definitely like actively working on that. And I'm like a huge advocate of just reaching out to people, like building up those relationships and kind of making it like mutually beneficial. I definitely learned like every single time I have done that, it's been very helpful. And like I know like especially entrepreneurs, like you're usually like very independent, like you feel like I can do this on my own, but you definitely learn a lot more when you talk to people who's like walked that same path, rather than just you're gonna walk it twice, basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Love that saying. All right, Michelle, going on to the next question.
Yeah, sure. I guess after the entrepreneurial journey you've been on, I guess what would you say was the best part of the founding process? And Keisha, do you want to start this off?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably doing the user research because I think it humanizes the product for me, or just like me personally, where I'm able to kind of consider, okay, what are the pain points? How can I improve this? And just talking to users about their experience or a problem that I'm trying to solve. And so definitely kind of gaining that user research. And from that, I learned a lot about just design itself in general, how you phrase a certain question, it will kind of redirect that other person's answers. So trying to minimize my own bias for when conducting this user research was really helpful. And I felt like I learned a lot. And honestly, that was like my favorite part of the founding process, was just figuring out the problem and how to really specify it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sophia, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think for me, the founding process, I guess, happened a little bit quickly just because I had the idea, and then the first thing that I needed was tutors, because this Tutoring for Heroes would be nothing without the amazing tutors that we have. I'm so thankful for them. So I think just having a really good response from my community and having people reach out wanting to tutor just it encouraged me to like keep pushing and keep going and keep asking people, just posting on like as many pages as I could, advertising for just looking for volunteers for the organization. So I think when I started to get a really good response and a lot of people replying and that were interested in not only being tutors, but asking if they could help me start up the organization, if there was like a leadership committee or just any ways that I could receive help, I think that was really encouraging, and it pushed me to keep going with the organization.
Yeah, for sure. Diondraya, can you go next?
Yeah, I guess two things stand out. The first, in sort of a general sense, watching the girls make progress is amazing. They're just always so blown away with themselves after they sort of look back and see how much they've accomplished and what they've been able to do. Girls have, finished the program and then gone to back to school and done independent studies to continue working on their ideas. So that's really great to see that there's some sort of lasting impact, or getting them excited about something that makes them want to keep doing it on their own time. But the other thing, which is sort of a moment that sticks out, was definitely my first sale. I just felt really like I had, especially given that it was a sale that I sort of got myself, like without, so there wasn't like an intro or anything of that nature. It really was just me being able to communicate the value and then someone else seeing the value in it. So that was a great place for me to start thinking about, okay, this, you might really have something, like, let's see how we can make this work best for students so that we can have more positive outcomes.
Yeah, that's super exciting, honestly. Last but not least, Min.
Yeah. I had like very similar to Deandra, like just kind of seeing like the community you're building and the impact that you have in the like area that you are is like really encouraging, and just like something that you feel proud of. Like I remember kind of like people that you even connect together and kind of seeing like, oh, a year later, oh, these people like joined because of like something that I started, and now they're best friends, and now they're roommates. Now they're living together for the past 2 years. Super cool to see, right? It's kind of seeing like the friendships that were formed, like kind of just seeing how much like positivity or like insights that you can bring to this community that wasn't there before. It's just like always something that makes me really happy to kind of reflect on. But I would say the second is just like more personal too, kind of seeing like the growth for myself. Like entrepreneurship is really hard. You learn a lot. There's like a lot of things that you have to test out and like figure out on your own. And so kind of like every so often just reflecting back and saying, oh wow, I've grown so much, like leadership wise, management wise, just like even my own like product design skills. And then like seeing a product, slowly get better and better. It's like, oh shoot, so cool. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things, like just like the small things that I feel very that makes me like feel proud of.
Yeah, for sure. Ria, can you ask the next question, please?
Yes, this is our last question in the first kind of beginning section before we go directly into the company questions. But our question is, how did you deal with competitors in your specific industry or field? And did you fear when you were starting out that you would kind of struggle with them? And I'm going to start off with Sophia here.
Yeah, so I definitely did think about that. I was looking for an idea that I hadn't heard of yet, just so that I could minimize the possibility of competitors. So I was trying to look for a unique idea, which is why this is what I did. But over time, I definitely did deal with competitors, some of even my own tutors going off and trying to start up the same things. And it's difficult. And when things like that happen, it is definitely discouraging. But you just kind of have to remind yourself, like, you know what, this is my work. This is something that I put so much time in. I'm not going to let a competitor discourage me, because honestly, like, we're all just trying to help healthcare workers. So I wasn't letting it get to me that they were doing it out of, like, I don't know, just to be like competition, I guess. We're all doing the same thing, and we all kind of had the same goal. So I think just kind of shifting my perspective on competitors, instead of seeing them as competition, it was, you know what, we're all trying to help healthcare workers, and maybe it's not such a bad thing that I should like let get to me.
Absolutely. Shifting her perspective is a great thing, especially when you're working as a nonprofit and tutoring and helping people. Min, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I have a very like similar perspective as Sophia. Like just kind of like competitors are out there, and especially if even like if you're a tech company, for example, like a common question that investors like to ask is, why can't like just a big four company do the exact same thing that you're doing and just utilize their network? But I think a common piece of advice that I hear is like, if you're really trying to solve like a problem, you shouldn't really care about the competitors out there. Like you should just focus on what you're doing and like providing value to the people that you want to provide value to rather than focusing on competitors. Like there's so much to focus on like for yourself anyways and what you're trying to build that like competitors is not something that you should, I guess, I mean, should always take into account, but I think not letting it get to you as much and kind of seeing like what is your unique advantage that they have not seen themselves. But I think in general, like when you're solving a problem, just really what Sophia said, like if you can provide value, that's what matters in the first place. And so like if they can do it too, like the pie is large, like there's so many segments that you can be in, like there's so many communities that are being untouched. And so just providing value in any sense is like a success to me.
That's amazing. I love how that ties to Diondraya's earlier point about defining what success means to you. Speaking of which, Diondraya, would you like to bring in your point?
Yeah, this was an interesting one for me to think about when the concept of having competitors in this space first came up, because I am a business. I'm not a nonprofit, but I am truly invested in the social impact of what I'm trying to do. And so I loved the term like landscape analysis as opposed to like, the competitive landscape, mostly because it just helped me to think about the fact that like this is a space and we're all trying to contribute, similar to the points from Sophia and Min. But it is really important to think about what is it that you're providing that's different, and what are your unique differentiators, not for the purpose of out competing, so to speak, which I do think is important if you're like purely a business. Think about that. But it's particularly in the space where you're trying to do some social good, really figuring out what can I bring to the space that's not already there, instead of sort of trying to disqualify yourself based on the fact that there are things that already exist. What can you do that's different? How can you add value to what's already in the space? And if you find a way to do that, then I mean, that should be your main concern. And as it relates to competitors that are going to continue to come up, you should also be continuing to innovate. So if you find yourself getting comfortable, that's a problem. Like continue to think about what makes you different, what will make you better, and what you can build upon so that you can serve the communities that you're trying to reach better, or so that you can serve your customers better, depending on your focus.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that point of not disqualifying yourself. I think that's hard, especially as a female founder when we're always second guessing ourselves. Keisha, would you like to add your thoughts?
I always feel like each product kind of has its own niche community or niche target. I think of it as like content creators online. Each of them have their own following. Each of them has its own niche community. And so I think if you're serving your community well, I'm not saying like, oh, it's not important to think of the other people who are also in that space as well. I also kind of agree that you should be innovating too, like not saying that don't get comfortable and just think, okay, my product's my product, that's it, bye and peace out, that's it, no change at all. But I'm saying like those things are also things to consider as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to throw that on over to Michelle for our next question.
Sure. And now we're going to talk about, different ups and downs, I guess. So you guys are obviously very successful, empowering and inspiring female founders, but have you ever been underestimated because you're a woman in a, I guess, male-dominating entrepreneurial scene? And can we start with Keisha, please?
I feel really lucky to have just kind of grown up with people who didn't really focus just on my gender. And so I think from that, I personally, just speaking from my own personal experience, I didn't feel like, oh, I'm being underestimated because of my gender. Maybe like someone was, but I just felt like I didn't take it in that way. And so I always think like if I'm the only girl in a room full of guys, I know it's like so awkward. But I always kind of think of what can I learn in this space, like, or how can I contribute my own personal opinion from my identity in this space. And so I always kind of think of it as not like me versus everyone else, but like, okay, how can we work together to do something? And so I think from there, I don't feel like I have been underestimated because I was a woman.
Yeah, I mean, the positivity, that's amazing. Min, can you go next?
Yeah. Um, I feel like that's hard to answer, like a little bit for me. I think there have definitely been a couple scenarios where I feel like a little bit underconfident, like as being one of the few women in a room, for example, and like at a networking event. And I feel like just based on like I'll feel judged maybe, and I feel like they automatically assume I'm a certain way, like, oh, she's probably just like a marketing person, you know, like she's probably, and I am doing like something related to fashion, which makes it like for some reason worse, you know, like I feel like I'm playing into some sort of like preconceived assumption. And I think like when I kind of bring on like, oh, it's kind of we're working on a tech product at the same time, it's like, oh, do you have a co-founder? And it's like, oh, I also contribute, right? But I think um it's like something that will be occasionally come up, but I think at the end of the day, like you own who you are. And I think that's the most value that you'll be able to get out of it is like once you realize your strengths and seeing like, oh, they don't, you know, like using it to your advantage and just being confident, and you know, just not letting anyone get to you. Like that's just the best approach in my opinion. And I
Yeah,
think it
for
really,
sure.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that's an ideal mindset to have as an entrepreneur, right? Um, Diondraya, can you go next?
Um, I I would say the space that I'm in, specifically like with women in entrepreneurship or encouraging girls to move into entrepreneurship, a lot of what I'm doing is working with women, or people involved in female-led organizations that find this work valuable. And so in that regard, no, I don't feel like I've been underestimated. But I'll say that I don't have the experiences personally of um, reaching out to investors, or so any of these situations in which I'm in front of people who don't, chiefly men, and I don't really have a lot of those sort of necessities right now. So that being said, I can't speak to that experience, and sort of internships that I've had where I've worked pretty closely with entrepreneurs, especially ones who are women, definitely did see a lot of this, like, she was one of them was solving a problem for women, and there were sort of men there who like, yeah, I don't get that. That's not, I don't think that's a thing. Um, so I really just think it depends on what stage you're in and what kinds of underestimation we might be talking about, because there's the kinds that just kind of get under your skin and you move on, the kinds that keep you from getting funding. So um, how you navigate that sort of depends on how much it matters. And sometimes it doesn't. And maybe sometimes it requires you to rethink some things. So take that for what it
Yeah,
is.
definitely. I agree with that. Sophia, can you pitch in?
Sure. I think for me, it's definitely just thinking about, maybe it'll be a little bit intimidating to enter a field that's dominated by men. So I think that was one of the initial thoughts that came to mind. But once I got started, um, really just pushing myself to, not think about that, not think about like criticism that I might face, especially because I'm looking at business and entrepreneurship in healthcare. Most doctors are men. And I think that's something that is changing, but it's happening very slowly. And I think that has just challenged me to push harder and to not give up on my ideas when you're entering a field that is not primarily dominated by women. Um, I just wanted to encourage women to push past that barrier, um, and change what we know is a male dominant field.
Yeah, that's amazing. Ria, can you take the next question, please?
Absolutely. So our next question for our panelists is going to be, what was the biggest mistake that you made when you first started out, and how have you overcome it, or how are you working on overcoming it still? I know everyone's going to take some time to think about this question, but I'm going to throw it to you, Keisha, and you can take a minute if you need.
The question was, what was the biggest mistake?
Yeah, the biggest, or you can talk about any mistake that you made that you had to overcome.
I don't know if I would consider it a mistake. I guess it's kind of like a learning experience. But I remember like the first idea that I had with my co-founder was to basically create a Chrome extension that was kind of like cash back based and accumulating all the credit. How should I rephrase this? So it's basically like a cashback Chrome extension. Yeah, in short. So I think from there we were really optimistic on it, and we didn't do enough research about what the space was for that. And so once we had our mentor gonna give let us know what are the pain points that we would probably have to struggle with a little bit, and doing extensive coding for cataloging a lot of the products and which members would use to like save money on things like that. I feel like we didn't do as much research that we could have done. And so from there, I think that was something that we had to really consider, is like, do we want to continue with this idea or do we want to pivot? So I think, yeah, I don't know if I would consider a mistake, but kind of another test on is this something that we're super passionate about, or is there another idea that we would much rather prefer working on?
That totally makes sense. I think a big thing about being an entrepreneur is figuring out whether the idea is viable or not. Yeah, thank you. Min?
Yeah, there have definitely been a good amount of mistakes or things that I've learned from. I think the biggest, it's hard to say because I agree with like Keisha, it's like everything's like a learning experience. It was bound to happen. It's just like how you learn from it, and utilize it to your advantage. But I think one key thing that I did wish I knew before starting out on just like any venture now is really just doing more research for how you can get something done. Like I think a common, like a piece of advice is, as an entrepreneur, just like get started as quickly as possible, right? Like create this something called an MVP, which is like a minimal viable product. So you can test out your idea. You can test out if like people like your product or not. You can see if it's like, what can you fix, blah, 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 blah. And I think we did make an MVP, but we didn't research enough of like, there's always like a really simple solution that you could do as an MVP. And so we spent like a very long amount of time creating our first initial MVP, doing all the design work ourselves, when there's design toolkits out there that you can borrow from. There's like a lot of like Shopify nowadays, like allows you to make an e-commerce site. There's like very specific niche, like startups or just companies that help you create these things called MVPs. And so I think if we looked into it more, we would have been able to go to market a lot quicker. And I think that would have given us a lot of valuable insight. So yeah, I think there's like this one quote too that's like, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, like I'll spend the first 5 sharpening the axe, something like that. So it's like very like, like it's how you prepare. It's like the way that you'll get things kind of efficiently done. But yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's an amazing learning experience for you moving forward. At least it was in the beginning, Yeah. Sophia?
Yeah, I think kind of related to what Min was saying, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made at the beginning was thinking I had to do everything by myself, which became very overwhelming very quickly. And I realized, this is not how it has to be done. Because it was all starting very quickly, I realized, I can't interview all 200 tutors that want to be a part of this and build a website and upload the tutors to the website and also be pairing up students with tutors. So I think just realizing that there's a lot of learning that has to be done and also taking time to do that and accounting for that when you are starting up. So just kind of having like a team to support you and to help you, and just delegating roles. Honestly, like even that's not easy when you're starting up, figuring out exactly what needs to be done. And then just choosing people that will support you and that you trust to help you build everything, just knowing that you don't have to do everything by yourself. It doesn't look weak, and it's not going to take any value from your company if you have help building and starting up whatever you're doing.
That's a great point. It's always really hard to delegate something that you're so passionate about. Diondraya?
My mentors stopped me from making several mistakes, which is great. But one thing I think that also my mentor stopped me from doing, but I had invested a lot of time in it before that happened, was just sort of preparing myself to take the leap and sort of putting what I had built out there for people to critique and give their feedback on and hate if that was the case. And I sort of was prolonging that sort of launch point and start just building more things. Like, okay, I have the workbook. Well, now I need to build lesson plans, like spending all this time building more stuff. And so my mentors kind of sat me down and was like, you're building stuff because you're scared to sell it. And that doesn't help you. That doesn't help girls. So stop. And I stopped. So I think that those kinds of lessons are just, I'll say, like something that is really important to me, similar to what I mentioned before. But mentors are so helpful in stopping you when you're doing something that you maybe shouldn't be doing, or even just helping you to think more critically about whether or not what you're doing is effective or useful as it relates to what your actual goals are. So I'll just sort of use this as another opportunity to advocate for finding some mentors that will give you their time and energy during this process.
That's amazing. I love that you're plugging mentorship more. So remember, guys, you can come to BWIB or Startup Labs for mentors if you want them. All right, back to Michelle for the next question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, living in a COVID era, I guess almost every aspect of our life has been shifted. And I can't even imagine what kind of impact COVID made on entrepreneurs like yourselves. So I guess what were the biggest struggles you faced during COVID, and how has it kind of changed or shifted your own business? And can we start with Diondraya, please?
Yeah. I think that it definitely forced me to change my sales strategy, but also gave me a great opportunity. Thankful that I have a job that I can do remotely and somewhere to live, so that these are definitely privileges a lot of folks don't have right now. And so, given that, I use it as an opportunity to reach girls that I probably wouldn't have had the ability to reach prior to. So this summer we had a really great program where we brought in some ambassadors from all different states, and I was able to work with them all individually as well as a group on their ideas, and really see or sort of have a close-up experience with them about how they're working through the material and what that felt like. And sort of, since they had more time, both because it was the summer, but also because all of the things they might otherwise be doing were not possible, it sort of gave them a chance to dedicate more time to their idea than they might have been able to do otherwise. And it gave me some great data, and just learned a lot about what this experience that I'm trying to facilitate really looks like from girls' perspective. So I'll say that, given the fact that I had a lot of sort of things in place and resources available to me during this time, I was able to make some positive use of this sort of being stuck at home situation.
Yeah, I mean, changing crisis into opportunity, that's amazing. Sophia, can you go next, please?
Sure. So I obviously started during COVID, and I think one of the main challenges that I faced was just spreading the word about it, not only to potential tutors, but also just like letting healthcare workers know, because we had over 250 tutors and just not enough healthcare workers like using the tutors. So I think that was one of the most challenging parts. I started just going to hospitals and passing out flyers, and I would ask nurses to put up the flyers in nursing rooms. I was calling like every hospital around my area, faxing flyers over, just trying to spread the word about it to let them know. So I think that's definitely something that I wasn't, I guess I just didn't think about it. I thought, oh, we have a bunch of tutors, of course healthcare workers are going to reach out, but it's just spreading the word about it and letting them know that this is a service that they can use was one of the main challenges that I faced during COVID.
Yeah, definitely. Keisha, can you go next?
Yeah, I think for me, it was that during the COVID period, me and my co-founder were still like students when this all started, and like Zoom, all that stuff was online. And so I think he got really busy with just like personal life and also classes online. So he dropped in. I think for me, I wanted to I think we were in the middle of building it, so we kind of had to put a pause on it. So I think that's like the biggest impact it had for my venture, at least. And then just kind of thinking about how to pivot it, or how to kind of continue to find a way to build it the way that I wanted it to be built.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really frustrating. Last but not least, Min, can you go next?
Yeah. So for us, like a little bit more background, like what we're building is like a local marketplace for people to meet up in person to buy and sell clothes. And we were actually on track to launch like spring quarter, but that's right when like COVID hit and then everybody went home. And so we actually had to delay our launch, which was pretty um, disheartening. But I think it gave us like opportunities to kind of explore our fields a little bit more, like test out different ideas. So we ended up launching like an e-commerce site online. And I think just in general, like this whole COVID situation, it's something that will just bring light to, you know, the future of what community means. Like even if it's not physical, you can't meet up in person, like there's so much value to be like created just through online as well, you know, and it could be equally as great. And so I think just focusing, like shifting our gears and focusing on how we can create a stronger online community is just what we've been focused on now. And I think it's something that everyone should hopefully focus, because I think it's something that you can just definitely merge the two together.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you must have been really excited to finally launch your business, and I'm so sorry to hear that. Next question, Ria, can you take it over, please?
Absolutely. So the next question is, what were the driving factors that have continued to keep you kind of passionate and confident about your company, especially if you receive some criticism? And I would say kind of a follow-up to that would be, how do you personally address imposter syndrome in your life? And I'm going to throw that first to Sophia.
Yeah, I think for Tutoring for Heroes, I think just remembering the community that we're impacting, and just always reminding yourself of why you started it in the first place. Because if you have a really strong foundation, you're really passionate about what you started, then it's going to motivate you to keep going and to do better. We get emails every week. Just last week, I had a nurse email me, and her daughter was going through chemo and she was looking for a tutor. And the fact that I could even help her in the smallest way just encouraged me and reminds me that, you know what, I have to keep this going, and I have to keep strengthening this organization as much as I can to serve the community that I wanted to help in the first place.
Yeah, that's amazing. It must be amazing to feel that you're really helping your community. That's awesome. Diondraya?
I mean, imposter syndrome definitely came up a lot for me, especially given the fact that when I first had this idea to use entrepreneurship as a vehicle to communicate these skills to girls, I didn't really know anything about entrepreneurship. So it's like the audacity of you to think that you could teach this. You have no idea what you're doing. And so it just took a lot of time. I learned a ton, sort of, did some things on my own, started some kind of many things. I worked with several startups, sort of pursued the entrepreneurship minor, all of this really in an effort to learn as much as I could. So that I could better communicate those skills to girls as well as develop them for myself. And through that process, I really fell in love with it. But still, you feel like, well, I haven't had an exit yet. Like, do I need to be able to demonstrate that I'm like this expert? And I think for me, at least, the short answer is no, because if I've learned nothing else through a lot of the different things that I've done, being someone who's had success with one venture or another does not make you a good teacher, especially to kids. So I think that that's been a great sort of place for me to remind myself that what you're doing and the way in which you're doing it matters. So if you're not sort of if you don't feel like you have everything you need, sometimes that's okay if you're really seeing that what you're doing is working for who you're trying to help or, solve this problem for.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's hard to remember that sometimes you need to make the leap and then decide, what are the things that I'm missing. So that's awesome. Keisha?
I felt like I experienced a lot of imposter syndrome just in my life personally as like a first gen student at UCLA, like not knowing all the resources at school and then feeling that I didn't know as much as the other person. I think that kind of comes down to, for me personally, I think the root cause of it was just like comparing yourself to another person, another peer, or another startup founder. And I think the biggest lesson that I learned from that, just as a founder and also as just an individual, is that comparison honestly is like the thief of, and it's not just like a not fair to you, but it's also unfair to the other person as well, the other person you're comparing yourself to, because people come into the space with like different backgrounds, different qualities, and to compare yourself to another person and put everyone on like the same standard is kind of unfair for everyone. So I think just kind of remembering why I'm doing something and making
Keisha, I think you cut out. So, wow, that was a really great point. I think we're going to move on to Min until you can get your internet back. So, Min, if you'd like to continue.
Sure. Sorry, Keisha. Hopefully she comes back soon. But I definitely resonate with like everything she just said. Like I'm very similar. Like I'm like, just graduated college. Like I still have imposter syndrome all the time for like most things that I do. Like just things that you learn, you can always compare it to where someone else, like even your age, is today. And so it's really hard to kind of like psychologically not think about that, right? And I think a really good quote, I love quotes. Like it's like instead of comparing yourself to like where people are today, like compare yourself to where you were yesterday. And it's really kind of more inward focus. It's like there's no use to comparing yourself to someone else. They have different lives. They were born in different circumstances. Like they have different skills, different strengths, and different weaknesses. And so just kind of focusing on like how I can improve like day by day has been helpful. And I think like kind of what keeps me going is very similar. Like I love entrepreneurship. I love feeling like I'm creating impact. I love building things. And so just going back to why I started something in the first place and why like I'm doing entrepreneurship in the first place just makes me feel content with like the choices that I'm making and the experiences that I'm having, and just every lesson that I learn, or like every failure, every like challenge. It's just, this is healthy, and it's just gonna eventually help you like lead you closer to your goals. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that idea of comparing yourself to your past self, because you can always show how you personally are improving. All right. I think Sophia, did you go first? I'm forgetting now. Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to throw it over to Michelle, and we're going to ask the next question.
Sure. We just want to talk a little bit about, work-life balance, I guess. So as entrepreneurs, your life must be really, I guess, fast-paced, exciting, but also exhausting, kind of prioritizing everything. So I guess my question is, how did you juggle working on your a startup at the same time with, your schoolwork and other, I guess, job positions? And can we start with Min, please?
Yeah. Let's see. Work life. I think, well, I did start my company like my senior year of college. And so I was definitely, and that was kind of like really brute building phase. And so it was a lot of design work, a lot of like engineering work involved, and just even like legal work. Incorporating company is like a headache. And I think kind of balancing it with school, I think at that point I was kind of more comfortable with knowing what provides value to me. And so like school is really helpful, and you should definitely, try to make the most of it and go to your classes and things like that. But I was the type where I felt like I can learn things on my own and really just take control of like what I'm doing every single day. And so just like being like definitely kind of knowing yourself in terms of like how much time you have to dedicate to a certain area and also still feel happy, because I think like you should be socially satisfied at the same time. Like you can only shut yourself in a room for so much. You know, you have to go outside and hang out with friends in order for your like mental health to be healthy. So I think a lot of it just comes down to knowing yourself and knowing like how hard you can work and knowing like what you need to keep a sort of balance in your life is like, because I think it's just different for everyone. But I think just taking into account, you know, those different factors.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we often overlook the importance of taking care of our, I guess, mental health. So that's a really great point. Sophia, can you go next, please?
I think for me, it was definitely difficult at first to kind of balance everything. And I think I became way more organized after starting up Tutoring for Heroes, just because I made sure that I set aside a certain amount of time at the very beginning just to work on the website or getting interviews ready. So it was honestly nice for me because it was like a break from my classes. I knew, you know what, like every evening for an hour and a half, I get to sit and work on my website. So it was definitely like a nice break for me, and it just forced me to do something else and not just constantly stare at like school all day. It was just like a breath of fresh air to be working on something that I really enjoyed. So I think it's actually really healthy to have something besides from school that you're really passionate about and that you really like, just for yourself to take a break and shift your focus to something that you're genuinely interested in.
Yeah, awesome. Is Keisha back?
Yeah, sorry to
you
cut off
are.
earlier. My Wi-Fi has
No,
been
no
in and out all
problem.
week. But in terms of like work-life balance, I think for me, I keep everything on a planner. So the moment I'm like, okay, I need to just discipline myself, and on Monday I need to do this, on Tuesday I need to figure out this, on like and just set deadlines for myself and kind of figure out from there like what I need to get done for each day. And so when I started this, I was also like a senior it's in school and just still doing my classes and everything. So I think it just had for me was being disciplined and basically not being lazy and not putting things off and really sticking to my deadlines.
Yeah, I mean, making a startup during your senior year sounds very tough. Diondraya, can you maybe pitch in, please?
Yeah. So I started probably, I would say, when it's really started things, maybe January of last year. So I was still in undergrad. And now in grad school, nothing has slowed down. In fact, it's probably gotten busier given the fact that I now sort of have a research job as part of my studies and then several other things to do. Pretty much have 3 tiers of organization for myself. It probably sounds crazy. The first one is sort of my calendar and my to-do list. If it's not on my calendar, it's not happening. And my to-do list is just sort of me thinking about, in the midst of all of these times on my calendar, all these things I have to do, what are those things that need to get done by the time the day is over? And then I have sort of the second tier, which is my whiteboard, and that stays on the wall. And those are things that I want to sort of have accomplished like within 1 to 3 months. These are sort of midterm goals, because if your day to day is not looking like your long term or midterm goals, you're not going to get there. So keeping myself oriented to that. And then the long term, which is the third tier, being my Trello board. So that's where I return to sort of ideas that I've had before, things that I wanted to do, wanted to work towards, that I don't have time to think about all the time. As I sort of accomplish the goals on my whiteboard and kind of revisit those, I use my Trello board to think about what are we looking to next, as well as reevaluating. So come up with a system for yourself and do your very best to stick to it, as well as making time. I am an avid Netflix watcher. I've watched most of what is on the platform. So, figure out what works for you. I watch Netflix. Maybe you like reading books or eating random snacks. Make time to do the things that you want to do. There are a lot of folks I know who have rules like I don't work on Sundays or, other things. So just set some boundaries for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good idea. I think we only have time to ask one more question from the panel, from the moderator. So Ria, can you take it over, please?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have the last question. All right. So this is a great one. Very exciting for me to always hear from everyone. What is the most valuable piece of advice that you've gotten? And I'll give you guys a second. I think I'm gonna go throw it to Min first.
Wrong person to throw it to first.
We can give it to someone else if you want. No worries.
Yeah, I feel like nothing comes like there's definitely pieces of advice that have stuck with me ish. Um, no, I'll just see. Let's see what comes up. I think yeah, actually I'll have to think about that a little bit more.
No worries. All good. Let's throw it to Sophia.
Sure. I think one of the most helpful pieces of advice, which I actually got from a nurse that was kind of my mentor, like at the hospital, is just knowing that you have like support for whatever you are doing. So I think her just telling me like, you know, if you need anything, like we are here to help you. I think even though like I knew that and I knew that I had support and people that wanted to help and wanted to help me succeed, I think just hearing that and knowing that you don't have to build anything by yourself and that you do have a group of people, even if it's small, even if it's just a few people, to support you and to help you, just kind of like reminding yourself that you don't have to do everything by yourself and you're being encouraged by like whoever this group of people is to push you and to help you excel in whatever you're doing. So I think for me, just someone telling me like what you're doing is good and we want to help you succeed in any way possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love to hear that. You know, you just being able to hear that validation of support is amazing. Keisha, what about you?
I think for me, the biggest advice that I can kind of think of right now is for people who say have an idea, but they're really scared of just putting it out into the world or just starting it. And that fear is kind of driving your decisions. It's my mentor told me this, and we were just kind of talking. He says he likes to frame like questions in when he wants to start something as what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And so I think that's something like good to think about. I think often like when you're an entrepreneur, sometimes what stops you is just fear itself. And so when you ask yourself that question, um, it should serve as an encouragement to just try at least. You know, like give yourself the chance. Like don't be the first person to tell yourself to not do something that you hope to just benefit your community or hope to have, you know, your product in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can always be our worst critics at times. So that's a really great point. Diondraya, what about you?
Two things come to mind. So the first one is most of the time there's no right answer, so stop looking for it. Um, you're not always going to know what to do, and sometimes there is a thing that maybe you should do. Sometimes you're just going to have to, take the leap, similar to sort of Keisha's point that you won't know a lot of the time, and so becoming comfortable with ambiguity is a necessity in entrepreneurship, or if you're trying to pursue anything entrepreneurial. The other thing I'll say is find your peace and protect it. Understand like where it is that you reset that helps you to function better, to let go of things. For me, that's my faith. For other people, that could be talking to your friends or calling your mom, like whatever that is, figure out the thing that sort of brings you peace. And when you're finding yourself being too overwhelmed or, thrown off by anything, reorient to your peace and then do what you can to protect that as you try to pursue your idea.
That's amazing. Those are very quotable quotes that I really like and definitely will be taking with me. Min, anything at this point?
Yeah, I guess the main thing that as an entrepreneur I like to tell myself a lot is just start. Like that's the best thing that you could probably do. And I think like especially, all of us like are UCLA students, we must have some form or just like you feel like embarrassed if you were to like put out something you're not proud of, right? But I think it's really hard to kind of just reframe your mindset and like just throw it out there, like just start even if you feel like you're not ready, because I think the experience that you're going to be able to learn from finally starting is more valuable than just waiting till you finally get it right, because you'll never know what's right. You know, you won't really know what's right until you keep trying. And I think entrepreneurship is a lot of the experience that you have, and what will really shape you to become a better entrepreneur. But yeah, I think that's just my best piece of advice. Just start even if you don't feel ready. Like there's always something. I think the earlier you start on an idea, just like talking to other people about it is like the best thing that you can do for yourself.
That's amazing. I love that. All right, so that was our last moderator question for now. We'd love to hear any questions that the audience has for the panelists. So for anyone who wants to ask a question, you're welcome to either send it in the chat or you can raise your hand if you want to ask it yourself. And we'll just give it a moment to see if anyone has any questions.
Here, I'll ask a question. So like in the very, very early stages of your guys' startups, when you just had the idea, I don't know if you were surrounded by a very entrepreneurial community or had people who you could talk to about this, but oftentimes when we talk to people who are interested in entrepreneurship, they're like, oh, like I want to go into the field, but I might not have an idea yet. So for people who kind of like just have an idea, but they have no idea where to go from there, what are some resources that you guys found on your journey that you guys can recommend?
I can take a stab at this one. I came to Startup UCLA with a problem. I didn't even have a solution at the time. I was just like, there's got to be something we can do about the fact that we don't have these conversations with girls earlier. I don't know if that's a nonprofit. I don't know if it's a book or a class or whatever, but like I know something needs to be done. And so I went to venture consulting meetings, specifically at the time with one of their venture consultants that was focused on social impact and nonprofit work. And she really helped me develop what it was that I was trying to get out of sort of the problem, like what I wanted the solution to actually do. And so that was monumental in helping me to sort of put some life into this like issue that was irritating me and turn it into an idea that could eventually become a solution. So I'll say that's a quick plug for Startup UCLA. If you have an idea, if you have a problem that you're interested in, go and you will likely get some good direction on what to do next.
That's amazing. Thank you for that point, Diondraya. Does anyone else have any resources they'd like to share? This is open to any of the panelists.
I think like what really helped me starting off was, I mean, I was always interested in like entrepreneurship in some point, but it's a very, like vague, like general term that can incorporate a lot of different things. And I think at UCLA, I joined like an entrepreneurship fraternity. And so just being surrounded by very like-minded people and seeing people who have actually gone down that route and their experiences, hearing from them was really helpful. And I think that really like helped sparked a lot of my entrepreneurial interests and like ambition. But I think like in terms of actual resources you can utilize, YC, if you heard of like Y Combinator, is like the huge, like one of the largest accelerators in the US, and they have like a startup school online. And so if you want to learn about more of like the entrepreneurial mindset, like what investing would look like, what VC would look like, how do you determine like if an idea is good or not, how do you find product market fit, things like those, things like that, you can just go up the startup school online. I feel like that has helped me a lot.
That's amazing. I love both the mindset and also like just having a specific resource that you can point people to. That's awesome. Anyone else? Sophia, Keisha, if you have anything else to add, you're welcome to. Otherwise, audience, also feel free to ask any questions.
While they're thinking of questions, I guess I can go. So for me, it definitely just started with an idea. And because my idea needed like a lot of people, I honestly just started posting on Facebook. I think those like UCLA pages, there's like billions of people on them. If you're trying to spread the word about something, like definitely use those. Honestly, I literally got like most of my tutors from there. And then that's when I started interviewing people, just because it was like such a large pool of people. So if you are looking to spread the word about your idea, if you're looking for help on an idea, I definitely think using Facebook groups, especially like the UCLA ones, if you're a part of those. I joined all of them from like class of 2020 to like 2024 and just mass posted and was overwhelmed with like the support from the UCLA community. So that was a big resource that I used.
That's amazing. What about you, Keisha? I know that you were involved in Startup UCLA, but
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about also just if you want to find opportunities and more resources, but you just don't know like where to start. It's also just subscribing to the Startup UCLA newsletter because they also have like links of upcoming competitions or deadlines or for applications that you can apply to for funding, things like that. So I felt like that was a really good resource for me to tap in. And yeah, because it's not just like based in school, but also like local things that you can also try out yourself. So I felt like that was a really helpful resource for me.
that's amazing. Okay. I'm not sure if we have any other audience questions. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Crystal, and see if there's any other questions maybe you got privately that you might want to ask.
Yeah, I have not gotten anything. So we'll just leave it open for a few more minutes if anyone has anything.
I guess I have one final question we could ask to anyone who wants to respond. Where do you guys see yourselves in 5 years? So do you want to continue on this entrepreneurial journey? Do you want to start at like a big company? Where do you see yourself making the most impact?
I guess I could start off.
Go ahead.
Okay. Great question, Paula. I think I'm like a planner, so I definitely plan out like different versions of like how my next 5 years could look like. With that, I think it's really up in the air. I think it really depends because right now I'm working on my startup full time, like after college. Um, and I'm really trying to get like as much traction as I can with it right now. But like at the same time, I'm really interested in UX design and product management. And so like while I'm working on this startup, like I'm keeping in mind like these are the skills I want to learn and build upon. So like my checkpoint is like a couple months from now, I'll kind of reevaluate and see, do I want to start looking to jobs that I think would better fuel my growth? Or do I think the startup will better fuel my growth right now? But regardless, I love like social entrepreneurship. That's what I want to do in the future, like build something that has impact. And so I would say like that's one. I think UX design, product management is another. And I think also possibly going to business school is also really appealing to me. So I do see myself possibly applying in a couple years. But I think at the end of the day, it's hard to tell. But I do know that I will be constantly trying to do something entrepreneurial and trying to be the best like product manager or like designer that I can be. And hopefully social entrepreneur. So
That's awesome. I think, Sophia, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so I think for me, my focus was definitely healthcare, especially with starting this organization. And I think it's really been interesting for me to kind of combine like business and healthcare and exploring different fields and stuff. So I do see myself working in healthcare, but just any way that I could like impact my community as much as possible. So I think Tutoring for Heroes is a way that I've definitely started to do that. And I think being exposed to the entrepreneurial side of healthcare has been something that's really interesting. So I think you can honestly mix any field with business and entrepreneurship. And if that is something that you're interested in, but you're also interested in another field, there are always ways that you can mix fields and do like exactly what you want to do and achieve your own goals.
Absolutely, totally agree. I think there's 1,000 jobs out there that even we don't know about. Diondraya, Keisha, do you have any answers to this question?
Yeah, I can go quickly. I'll hopefully be finished with, or at least finishing my PhD in 5 years. And with that, I think I'll definitely still maintain an interest in research. I'm really interested in the impacts of entrepreneurial education as well as the experiences of women. So maybe I'll find a way to combine those. Maybe that will be sort of separate areas of my research interests. But regardless, I definitely see myself continuing to do research that hopefully informs the production of other social entrepreneurial efforts or nonprofit efforts that allow women and girls to be better prepared to succeed in the world in whatever ways they choose.
That's amazing. I love that. And a PhD is awesome. Keisha, what about you?
What a great time to actually bring up this question because I've been thinking about it a lot. Um, I'm working full time in the fintech space, but I'm also kind of thinking of pivoting, and I think pivoting to what space is the question that I have in my mind right now because I feel like I have a lot of different interests and I want to try them out and then see what specifically I like. I love the digital media space. I really like the fintech space. And I also love working with content creators or would really appreciate a user research role. And so I think trying that out. And I think it's when you don't necessarily know what you want to do, what's awesome is just to contact like UCLA alumni, just like cold email them and just ask them like, hey, what's your experience regarding this? Like the UCLA alumni network is just so big and they're always so eager to talk to like younger students. So I think just kind of figuring out that right now.
That's amazing. All right. So I think that's time. I'm going to throw it back to you, Crystal, to wrap it up.
Yeah, so that is pretty much time. And if you are interested in further checking out any of the initiatives that our panelists have worked on, Paolo has been plugging everyone's links literally everywhere and constantly throughout this panel. We'll also plug it again when we post this recording. If you are interested in creating your own startup or starting your own entrepreneurial venture, Startup Labs is continually taking applications at this point. We will also be posting that application link as well. Paolo has also been amazing in creating a UCLA ecosystems map for specifically entrepreneurship. And it's an amazing document. He doesn't give himself enough credit for creating this. And it's an amazing resource. So we will also be plugging that as well. And if you do need a community of just females to support you, doesn't even have to be females, and within like the entrepreneurial space, Bruin Entrepreneurs, as well as Startup Labs, Startup UCLA, and Bruin Women in Business are all here to help you on your journey. So thank you everyone for staying this long, and thank you to both our moderators for asking these wonderful questions and curating questions for these great discussions. Thank you to our lovely panelists for coming out and taking the time to share your experiences. I hope this was enlightening, motivating, and inspiring for everyone here. And with that, I'll end the recording unless, Paolo, you have any last minute words to say or anyone has any last minute words to shout out and put out there. But yes, a huge thank you for everyone.
Yeah, just one final thing. We were supposed to have Riley with us as a panelist, and she wasn't able to make it today, but we will be posting her recording on all of our social media as well. And this recording, along with all the links that I've plugged, will be on our socials. So anybody who's watching the recording, just head to the Facebook links and you'll see everything that like all of our panelists have been doing.
All right, and with that, let me stop the recording.